On a gentle sunny afternoon in San Francisco, Lucas Bennett, a renowned tech entrepreneur with an immense fortune, was gliding through the bustling streets in his sleek Tesla Roadster. His life had long been programmed by luxury and solitude. Success, fame, and influence were all in his grasp. But something had always been missing. Lucas had never paid much attention to emotions, let alone believed in the bonds of family. But then, a sudden moment shattered that perfect rhythm. Stopping at a red light on the corner of Valencia Street, he caught sight of a young woman crossing the road with 4 small children in tow. It wasn't an unusual sight in such a crowded city, but what froze Lucas in place was their faces. Each glance, each smile. How could they look so much like him? His heart clenched with a feeling he couldn't name. Confusion, disbelief, and most strangely, a silent sense of connection. A question slipped into his mind uninvited. Have I met them before? That fleeting moment, one he might have dismissed on any other day, was the spark that lit the path toward a journey he never saw coming. A journey that would change everything. Lucas Bennett was the kind of man the world admired. A tech genius, CEO of a leading software empire, frequently featured on the covers of elite magazines. He lived in a penthouse high above San Francisco, its floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the glittering skyline at night. But beyond those glass walls, his life was far from glowing. His mornings began with automated coffee, followed by endless boardroom meetings, and ended with solo dinners at a long, silent dining table. No family, no close friends, no relationship that ever lasted long enough to be called love. Parties, flings, and million-dollar deals were just lines of code he used to mask the emptiness. Lucas didn't believe in attachment. In a famous interview, he once said, "I don't need a family to feel complete. I already have everything I need." That statement had guided his entire life, but sometimes the ones who believe they need nothing are the ones missing the most. To Lucas, the word father was just an abstract concept. His own parents died when he was young, and the only person who ever held him close, his grandmother, was now old and frail. He owed her everything, yet had never considered creating a family of his own. To him, emotions were unstable, logic was controllable, and therefore preferable. Until that day, when he saw the eyes of a child who looked just like him, holding hands with a woman he didn't know. A tiny crack formed in the glass of Lucas's carefully constructed world. And from that moment, everything began to change. After that fleeting moment, Lucas could have simply looked away and returned to his life. But he didn't. He swerved sharply to the curb, heart pounding. The children's faces replayed in his mind like a question without an answer. Could it be? No, it was absurd. But the resemblance was undeniable. From their bright blue eyes and angular chins to the same mischievous spark he remembered from his own childhood photos. It gripped him with a force he couldn't ignore. As Lucas stepped out of his car, the young woman, Isabella, instinctively pulled her children closer. Her eyes were guarded, her posture ready to move at any second. "I'm sorry," Lucas began, trying to sound as gentle as possible. I don't mean to intrude, but these children..." His voice faltered. Something unfamiliar, a tremble in his words, surfaced after years of suppression. He removed his sunglasses and stared into the children's faces. "They look incredibly like me." Isabella stared back, silent. There was something in her eyes, not fear, but a quiet defensiveness born from years of fighting for her children alone. "That's none of your business," she replied firmly, not harshly. "They're my kids. That's all." Lucas took a small step forward, still calm. "I don't want to cause trouble, but I need to understand." She turned to walk away, then hesitated. Maybe it was the look in his eyes. Maybe she knew deep down that one day this truth would have to surface. "They don't have a father," she said. "Only me. That's all you need to know." Lucas felt his chest tighten, but something, his instincts, which had never failed him in business, told him the truth was more complex. He lowered his voice and took a breath. "Just one question," he said. "5 years ago, did you ever go to the Glenview fertility clinic?" Isabella froze as if struck by lightning. Her eyes blinked rapidly, breath catching. A thick silence filled the space between them. Yes, she whispered. One word, and everything inside Lucas crumbled and lit up at once. The final piece had fallen into place. Standing before him were not just children who looked like him, but children who might very well be his own flesh and blood. Lucas stood frozen, as if he'd just been punched in the chest. He hadn't expected Isabella's quiet yes to hit with such weight. All his doubts and vague suspicions now collided into one very real possibility, that he was the father of these 4 children. And the scariest part was that he had absolutely no idea. Isabella kept her gaze lowered, eyes fixed on the pavement, as if bracing for whatever storm would come from the man standing in front of her. But Lucas didn't yell. He wasn't angry. He simply stood in silence. A silence that was heavy, profound, and suffocatingly honest. "This can't be," he whispered. I don't have kids. I've never..." He stopped himself. And then, like a gust of wind knocking over forgotten memories, something rushed back to him. Years ago, when he was a struggling Stanford student, he'd sold sperm at a reputable fertility clinic, Glenview. Everything was confidential, anonymous. He had barely given it a second thought. Until now. Lucas looked at Isabella, and his eyes no longer belonged to a cold businessman. They were wide, disoriented, and aching. "I might have been the donor," he said softly. "I never thought it would lead to anything. They told me it would be used once, for one woman only." Isabella looked up. There was pain in her eyes and a deep, restrained anger. "And I was that woman," she said quietly but firmly. "I put my faith in them, and now here you are, looking at my children as if they're strangers." Lucas pressed a hand to his forehead, trying to steady the chaos spiraling in his mind. He didn't know what to say or do. Somehow these children, once total strangers, now felt like a weight he was meant to carry. "I'm not here to destroy anyone's life," Isabella continued, her voice trembling but resolute. "I don't want your money. I don't need pity. I just wanted to be a mother, on my own." Lucas stepped back. Those words cut deeper than he expected. He could feel the strength it had taken her to walk this path, alone. "But they're mine," he said, finally giving voice to what his heart had known from the start. "I feel that. There's a connection." Isabella turned her face, trying to hide the flood of emotion. She was used to being dismissed, questioned, doubted, but something in Lucas's eyes made it harder to walk away this time. "I don't know who you are," she whispered. "I only know I fought for them, every hour, every day. No one beside me, no one to share it with. And suddenly, you're here, claiming to be their father." Lucas nodded slowly. "I know it's not enough, that they look like me, or that I have a vague memory. But I want to know the truth. I want to know them. And I want to know you." A long silence followed. Isabella tightened her grip on her youngest hand, then said quietly, "Then you have to understand. Nothing about this will be simple from here on." "Get in the car," Lucas said, his voice deep but firm. "I'm not forcing you to do anything, but I'd like to talk, somewhere quieter." Isabella looked at him, then glanced back at her children. The 4 of them were laughing, playing together, unaware that their lives were about to change forever. After a long pause, she nodded. The Tesla glided smoothly through the city streets, carrying a heavy silence inside. Lucas kept both hands on the steering wheel, eyes forward, but his thoughts were in chaos. Isabella sat beside him, cradling the youngest child, her gaze distant and still. Finally, Lucas spoke. "Why did you choose that path?" he asked softly. "Why artificial insemination? Someone like you, beautiful, strong. Why didn't you have anyone?" Isabella turned to the window, not responding at first. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, measured, but laced with years of buried sorrow. "I'm from Guadalajara, Mexico. I used to be an elementary school teacher," she began. "When I was younger, I loved, blindly and with my whole heart. I married the man I thought was my forever. But things changed. He began to resent me, all because I couldn't have a child." Lucas remained silent. "My 3 years of marriage were filled with tests, tears, and silence," she continued. "When the doctors said I had fertility issues, he called me a burden. Then he left, without a word. without a goodbye. She clenched her hand gently. I lost everything, my husband, my dignity, and a part of myself. But I refused to let that pain define who I was. I filed for divorce, took what little money I received, and moved to the United States. I told myself, if I'm going to be a mother, it will be on my terms. Lucas glanced at her. His expression was no longer cold. It was filled with quiet admiration and shame. I went to a fertility clinic, Isabella said. I selected a donor based on traits, intelligence, health, character. I had no idea the man I chose would turn out to be someone like you. Not because you're wealthy, but because fate clearly has a strange sense of humor. She turned to face him. And I never thought I'd have to explain all of that to the father himself. Lucas bit his lower lip, his eyes flickering away. I was careless back then, he murmured. I never thought my one choice would become someone's entire world. Isabella nodded slowly. I don't blame you, but I'm not asking you to stay either. Then she smiled, a calm but unshakable smile. Those 4 kids, they're my everything. And if you want to step into their world, you have to understand that love, not money, is the only thing that will keep you there. Isabella's story landed like slow, deliberate knocks against the invisible walls Lucas had built around his heart for years. Each word she spoke, not dramatic, not begging, made him feel smaller in a world he once believed he had full control over. How many women had he met in his life? How many were beautiful, accomplished, educated, admired? Yet none had made him truly listen the way Isabella just had. In her eyes, there was no regret, only unwavering conviction in the power of motherhood. Something he had never understood, much less longed for. For the first time in years, Lucas found himself truly silent. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he felt words were simply not enough. He glanced at the rearview mirror, where the 4 children were dozing off, peaceful, as if the world outside had never tried to break them. And then a single question rang clear in his mind, like the strike of a bell. If this is the family fate had been hiding from me all along, do I have the courage to keep it? Lucas said nothing for the rest of the drive. His mind was filled with the faces of the children, Isabella's calm yet resolute voice, and a deep ache he'd never dared name before. It was time to stop running. As the car turned onto the winding road leading to the family estate, Lucas knew there was one more person who needed to meet these children. Not out of duty, but out of love. Something he had never truly understood until today. The Tesla quietly came to a stop in front of a wrought iron gate, guarding a stately mansion nestled in the outskirts of San Francisco. As the gate opened, it revealed lush gardens and tree-lined paths leading to a white house that stood still under the soft light of sunset. Isabella stepped out, holding her children's hands. The kids, groggy from a short nap, gazed around in wonder. Within moments, all 4 were sprinting across the grass, laughing as if they had found paradise. Their innocent joy echoed through the quiet air. Lucas stood beside Isabella, his eyes softened by the scene before him. He murmured almost to himself, as if confirming something he still couldn't fully grasp. They've arrived at their father's home. Isabella looked at him, stunned. The words, simple and soft, struck her heart with unexpected force. Why did you bring us here? She asked, still holding her children tightly, cautious. Lucas didn't answer right away. He pointed toward the grand house. I want my grandmother to meet them. She raised me. She's nearing the end of her life. And I can't let her leave without knowing she has great-grandchildren. Isabella hesitated, but Lucas's eyes no longer looked like a stranger's. They carried the quiet ache of a grandson, trying to make something right. They walked through the warm, quiet house. Golden light poured over the white walls. The air held the weight of memory, aged but welcoming. At the end of the hallway, a wooden door creaked open. A trembling voice came from inside. Lucas, is that you? Lucas stepped in. On a bed near the window lay an elderly woman with silver hair in a frail frame, but eyes that still burned with quiet strength. Grandma June, Lucas whispered, kneeling by her side. I've brought you what you always dreamed of. Not 1, but 4. Her eyes widened, tears slipping down her wrinkled cheeks as she saw the 4 small children standing behind Lucas, curious but polite. Isabella approached gently, reaching out to take the woman's hand. "They're your great-grandchildren," she said softly. "They came into this world with all the love I could give." Grandma June clutched her hand, her tears flowing freely. "You are a miracle," she whispered. "And these children, they are the wonders this family thought it had lost." Lucas stood quietly. In that moment, he wasn't CEO Lucas Bennett. He was a grandson, a father, and a man beginning to understand what it means to love. Isabella kept holding Grandma June's hand, saying nothing more. But in the old woman's eyes, there wasn't just emotion. There was a strange familiarity, as if she had known Isabella long before this day. Gently, she squeezed Isabella's hand and whispered through a frail breath, "Thank you for bringing light back into this home." Isabella couldn't hide the emotion that welled up inside her. For years, she had carried her burdens alone, facing life, doubt, and a silence that often screamed louder than words. And now, in the arms of someone who was technically a stranger, she felt like she had come home. "I only tried to do what was right," Isabella murmured. Grandma June shook her head gently, her eyes full of warmth as they turned toward the children. "No, you did far more than that. You held on to hope when the world turned its back on you. You loved them with everything you had, even when you had no one. And now, because of you, I've seen something I feared I would never live long enough to witness." She looked at Isabella as if she were a daughter the world had forgotten to give her. "You are the missing piece this family has always waited for. And I thank you for that." Isabella smiled softly through tears. In that quiet room without any formal promise, an invisible thread was tying two women together, through understanding, through gratitude, and through a love that needed no blood to be real. In that moment inside the room bathed in golden dusk, Lucas felt something within him shift forever. He was no longer the man who lived only for himself. His grandmother had found what she had longed for. Isabella had found quiet acceptance, and the children. They were beginning to discover the feeling of home. But just as the mansion seemed wrapped in fragile peace, the sound of high heels echoed sharply through the marble foyer. The front door hadn't even closed before a familiar voice rang out, bright, confident, and laced with frost. "Lucas, I'm home, darling." Lucas turned instantly. His face paled. Isabella froze as well, eyes widening at the sight of the woman who stepped inside. Elegant, confident, wrapped in fur, her sunglasses oversized and sparkling diamonds hanging from her ears and wrist. "Veronica," Lucas murmured. Veronica Chase, celebrated fashion designer, and, by title, Lucas's fiancée. She moved to the center of the room like a queen entering her palace, her gaze scanning the faces until it settled on Isabella. A thin smile tugged at her lips. "Well," she said, "do we have guests? Or should I say, a little family gathering?" Lucas didn't respond in time. Veronica's eyes flicked to the children now clustered protectively around Isabella, sensing the shift in energy. "They look alarmingly like you," she continued, voice tight with mockery. "I leave for Paris a few weeks and come home to find you've made 4 little copies?" Lucas swallowed, unsure where to begin. Isabella stepped forward, calm but firm. "I'm Isabella Ruiz," she said clearly. "And yes, these are my children." Veronica raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "So you're the new nanny, or something more creative?" Lucas clenched his fist. "Veronica, that's enough." But she wasn't finished. With the grace of someone used to getting her way, she pulled an envelope from her designer purse and held up an ultrasound photo. "I bring news too," she announced. 3 babies, growing inside me. Yours, Lucas." The room froze. Isabella stared at Lucas, not afraid but steady. Her eyes held nothing but truth. "That's not possible," she said calmly. "Lucas donated sperm years ago. That's how I had these children. And whether he admits it or not, they are his biological kids." Veronica laughed, loud and sharp. "You expect me to believe that?" She turned to Lucas, full of scorn. "You're really letting her stand here with these bastard kids pretending they belong in our lives?" Lucas stayed silent. He was fighting his own storm, memories, logic, emotion. Isabella didn't step back. She moved forward, shoulders square, eyes locked on Veronica's with quiet strength. "They're not bastard," she said. "They're his children, born from a decision he thought wouldn't matter. But I raised them, gave them everything. If anyone here deserves to be called family, it's me and them." Veronica gripped her purse tighter. "You won't leave me for a woman like her." Lucas finally lifted his gaze. In his eyes now there was no more hesitation, only the first flickers of truth catching fire. Before Lucas could say a word, the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps echoed from the hallway. All eyes turned. Grandma June, leaning on her cane, walked steadily into the room. Though her age showed in her frail frame, her eyes remained sharp, not from sight but from the clarity and wisdom that had never left her. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice weak but steady. Veronica instinctively took a step back, trying to keep her composure. "Grandma, you shouldn't be up. I just got back and—" "Silence, Veronica," Grandma June cut her off. "I wasn't talking to you." Lucas stepped forward, his voice tight. "She says she's pregnant with my children." Grandma June looked at Veronica for a long moment. Then she turned to Lucas, her gaze not angry, just sad. 3 years ago, you were seriously ill. The doctors said it might affect your fertility. You chose to have a vasectomy. Did you think I didn't know?" Lucas froze. "You knew?" "I was there, Lucas. I heard the doctors. I didn't stop you. I thought it was what you wanted. But since that day, I've carried a truth you may have forgotten. You can't have children anymore." Veronica stiffened. Her lips pressed into a thin line. The room grew cold and quiet. "And because you never had the reversal," Grandma continued, her voice calm but cutting, "it means there is no way those 3 babies she claims are yours." Lucas turned to Veronica, betrayal flooding his eyes. "You lied to me?" he whispered. Veronica said nothing. Her eyes flickered, then turned away. Isabella remained still, her arms instinctively wrapping around her youngest child. Lucas stood in stunned silence, watching the truth crash down like a wave, sweeping away every lie he'd once clung to. Then slowly, he stepped forward. Lucas took one step closer, voice shaking. "I'm sorry," he said, hoarse. "I was blind. Too slow to see what I should have seen from the start. I can't change the past, but I want to be part of your life and theirs." Isabella looked at him for a long moment. No anger in her eyes, just silence, and something deeper. Behind them, Grandma June watched it all unfold, then smiled faintly. There was pain in that smile, but also peace. The truth had finally surfaced, and now it was time to begin again. After a long, motionless silence, Lucas stood staring at Isabella. Everything that had just happened seemed to wipe away all the illusions, all the ideas he once believed were true about himself. He had once thought he didn't need anyone, that career, power, and wealth were enough. But now, standing in his own home, was a woman he'd never known before, 4 children who wore his face, and a grandmother looking at him as if she had always known he was meant for something greater. Lucas took a deep breath. Then he stepped closer to Isabella, his voice low but full of emotion. "I've spent my life in a world of my own, Isabella, a place where logic ruled and feelings had no place. But when I saw you and the kids, everything changed." Isabella said nothing. She didn't look away, but she didn't soften either. She had heard promises before, empty words. She wasn't interested in poetry. She wanted truth. Lucas went on, his eyes unwavering. "I can't go back in time. I can't undo the pain you carried alone. But if you'll let me, I want to step into that world with honesty. Not as someone seeking forgiveness, but as a man ready to learn how to love." He glanced at the children, 4 sets of wide, curious eyes watching his every move. "I want to be a father, not on paper, but through actions, every single day." Isabella stood still, gazing at Lucas as if reading the truth written deep inside him. Her eyes held layers of memories, cold, rainy days in a foreign land, sleepless nights with feverish children, quiet evenings in an empty room, wondering if she had been wrong to choose motherhood alone. She had learned not to need anyone. She had lived within walls she built to keep pain away. But now, In this moment, hearing words Lucas had never said to anyone, seeing the way he didn't flinch, didn't calculate, something inside her softened. "You don't have to be perfect," Isabella said quietly, like a breath long held. "We don't need a hero, just someone real, who stays when things get hard." Lucas nodded slowly, a silent promise written in his stillness. Isabella looked back at the children, then knelt to gently stroke the cheek of the youngest, who clung to her dress, staring wide-eyed at the man he didn't yet understand. "They've lived their whole lives without knowing the word father," she whispered. "But if today is the day they get to say it for the first time, I hope it's for you." She stood again, meeting Lucas's eyes, not as a stranger, not as the distant echo of a clinic choice, but as a man who had stepped forward by choice. It was a late autumn afternoon, golden sunlight spilling gently over the lush grounds of the mansion. Beneath an archway of white flowers, arranged lovingly by Grandma June and the loyal staff, a small, intimate ceremony was held. No extravagance, no spectacle, only love and truth. Lucas wore a simple gray suit, standing beneath the floral arch with hands that trembled slightly from emotion. Opposite him, Isabella walked slowly in a pure white wedding dress, humble yet radiant, just like her spirit. The 4 children followed behind her, each holding a small bouquet, their expressions a mix of wonder and delight. They didn't fully understand the meaning of this day, but they knew it was special. The man who always looked at them with warm eyes would now be their dad. Grandma June sat in the front row, her frail hands clasped together, eyes glistening with tears. When Lucas and Isabella exchanged vows, she nodded slowly, as if she could finally lay down the burden she had carried for a lifetime. "My grandson," she whispered. "He finally understands what happiness means." After the ceremony, the family shared dinner under golden lights. The children giggled and chased each other between the tables. Lucas leaned in to whisper something to Isabella, making her laugh. Softly, freely, like it had always been meant to be. Lucas was no longer the cold man he once was. He was a husband, a father, learning to love, to listen, to kneel down and tie shoelaces, to wake at midnight when the children cried. And he loved every moment of it. As dust settled, Grandma June held Isabella's hand, her voice faint but full of peace. "Thank you for bringing him back and letting me go in peace." Isabella embraced her, eyes filled with tears. The 4 children clung to Grandma's legs, as if they already knew how precious this goodbye would be. Family, never perfect, but always where love chooses to stay. And now this house was finally whole. A few months after the simple wedding beneath the white floral arch, the Bennett mansion gradually began to change. Not in architecture or interior design, but in sound. Children's laughter echoed every morning, the pop of toast from the toaster, the soft patter of tiny footsteps racing through the marble-floored hallways. Lucas Bennett, once a man who lived in silence and order, was now learning how to live amidst warm chaos. He often woke earlier than the rest, sitting by the window with a book while Isabella and the 4 children were still asleep. Sometimes he made the coffee, sometimes he forgot, but Isabella never complained. She would simply smile, place a hand on his shoulder and say, "You brewed it a bit strong today." Every day felt like something new. Lucas was learning how to be a father, not a biological one, but the kind who listens, helps with math homework, comforts a child after a nightmare, and reads fairy tales 3 times in a row just because Luna wasn't sleepy yet. He once believed emotions were variables too unpredictable to control, but now he knows. True love needs no formula. It only needs one thing, the choice to stay, even when tired, even when imperfect. The following spring, the garden behind the Bennett estate bloomed more vibrantly than ever before. The lavender bushes that Isabella had planted with the children had taken root firmly, filling the air with a soft, soothing scent. The kids loved nothing more than running barefoot on the grass in the afternoons, playing their favorite game, butterfly chase. And Lucas? He always sat from afar, watching them with a tenderness that once seemed impossible. He was no longer the man who only cared about financial reports or board meetings. Now Lucas Bennett woke up early to prepare bottles, learned how to braid his daughter's hair, and even began studying Spanish to better understand Isabella's heritage. In the once quiet kitchen, the mornings were now filled with voices blending English, giggles, and the sounds of childhood. "Mommy, Leo snuck a cookie again," little Alma shouted, making the whole house burst into laughter. Still stirring her soup, Isabella called back, "Whoever sneaks food will be washing all the dishes today." Lucas leaned down and whispered in Leo's ear, "If you do the dishes, I'll treat you to a cartoon movie tonight." Alma wouldn't let that slide. "That's not fair. Daddy's bribing." Laughter echoed again, like happiness had become an essential item on the family's daily menu. Grandma June, though frailer now, wore a smile brighter than ever. Every morning she sat in her rocking chair by the window, listening to the children talk about school, new friends, and who ran fastest that day. Isabella always brought her a warm cup of ginger tea, while Lucas never forgot to tuck a blanket gently over her legs. One golden afternoon, sunlight spilling through the glass, Grandma June called Isabella to sit beside her. "You know," she said, voice weak but steady, "since the day you walked into this house, everything started to breathe again." Isabella gently squeezed her hand. "I only did what my heart believed was right." "No," Grandma replied softly. "You did what this entire family had long forgotten. You chose to love without conditions." One early winter evening, snow fell gently like sugar dusting the rooftops. The whole family gathered around the fireplace where the golden flames cast a warm glow over each joyful face. The children curled up under blankets, listening as Lucas read fairy tales. His voice deep and steady, occasionally faltering with emotion. Isabella rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the soft, steady rhythm of his heartbeat, calm and full of peace. Grandma June nodded off in her chair, as if she could leave this world at any moment, but with nothing left to regret. On the bookshelf, beside newly framed family photos, stood one special frame, a handwritten letter from Lucas to his younger self. "One day, if I ever find the courage to choose love instead of running from it, I'll finally understand. Not everyone is born with a family, but everyone deserves to be loved as if they've never been abandoned." That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Lucas stepped out onto the porch, gazing up at the star-filled sky. Isabella joined him quietly, slipping her hand into his. "Do you think," he asked, "that will be enough for them?" Isabella smiled softly. "We don't have to be perfect. We just have to stay and love." Lucas gently squeezed her hand, as if etching that promise into the deepest part of his soul. And when the door closed behind them that night, it was no longer the door to an empty mansion, but the door to a home, one built not by blood, but by choice, by love, and by the quiet courage it takes to stay. Because sometimes, the most precious things in life aren't what we find, but who chooses to stay when we have nothing left. That is home.